Ash, in your experience, around the regions, what are the two most common ways people deal with their biosolids?
Landfill, geobags and landfill.
Geobags and landfill.
Yeah, that's pretty common. I mean, some of the councils do have thickening, dewatering to reduce the transport costs to the landfill, but very little processing or degradation steps.
Do you think organic contaminants or even things like plastics and PFAS is even being thought of right now?
Not
on the wastewater side.
Yeah. And drinking water, yes.
Yeah.
So we will get there, and I suspect this will become a driver in years to come. And when it does, we might all be in for a shock once we start doing analyses on our own biosolids, finding all that glitter, all those microplastics, that fibre. So definitely the environmental drivers are becoming stronger, and the net zero drivers. We're net zero 2050 in Aotearoa, New Zealand, aren't we? So that is coming, but at the moment, not so much.
Yep.
I guess, what do you think some of the things we could do as a country to facilitate the introduction of facilities like these, particularly in the areas where it's currently difficult, where you may have 3 or 4 little councils separated geographically who are not currently mandated to work together on centralised facilities like this, and for whom their rating base simply can't sustain investment in things like a dryer and gasifier?
Oh, it's $1 million question.
Isn't it just? It is a multi-million-dollar question.
How do you persuade essentially people who don't really have any drivers to do it, and maybe they have internal drivers but maybe don't have the money, because that's reality. I guess in my mind, from a commercial perspective, nothing beats seeing something that's worked to engage interest. So I'm really keen to get a demonstration plant to put in here, a nice small-scaled one. Then we could show councils, look, it's very effective, and these councils, can essentially make these things into money-making streams for your own purposes. And I think Australia did that, down in Australia with their Logan Home plant. It was 6 years in the making, but then they had something to show for it, and that generated probably more interest than anything theoretical. So that's something that could be done. I know there's multiple funding opportunities, even in the carbon emission space or zero waste space. I think it just takes 1 or 2 champions to really push it, get something in the ground and show it around and generate interest. I'm really bagging on the 3 water reforms to happen to allow for these things to happen financially, because right now I think that's probably the biggest limitation.
Yeah, it is.
It does, yeah. Now, there's a lot of really smart people everywhere around the country, including around all the regions, who would love to do something like this, I imagine, if they were enabled to do so, if the money was available, if the legislation allowed, if you could get a consent for it, all of that sort of thing.
What do you think? How would you see more of this happening?
I think reform in some shape or form needs to happen. One, to loosen the purse strings and release the current debt cap for local government, and either through governance or mandate, look at the collaboration of geographically adjacent jurisdictions and start undertaking business case analysis and asset planning analysis at a more regional level. And that is the intent, I think, of a lot of this reform, is to do that. And once you do that, and then it's not necessarily taking anything away from people, it's saying, well, now we can afford a gasifier plant to deal with our biosolids, to produce fertiliser for the region, to reduce our carbon emissions through waste treatment. And so I think that would be a really positive thing. So we'll all be watching with great interest to see where that ends up.
And when we talk about these things, the resources and training in New Zealand, I mean, that always comes into the picture, right? So I was talking to a local council a few weeks ago, and they have the sludge and they put it in a sludge pond, and then just desludge it every 5 years, 10 years or something. And so that's easy for them, right? Just pump it across and just forget about it. So the next manager will, that's his problem.
Yeah.
So that kind of mentality still exists, and it's not lack of will. They do want to seriously want to do something, but they're hampered by other political things and funding and all that kind of carry on. So to actually convert those people, back into this particular council I was talking to, I said, why, think about a thickening dewatering process at least, and have you looked at that? He said, well, that means I have to add another couple of processes to my plant, all the chemicals and trucking and this thing. I don't have the resources to operate them.
Yep. Yeah.
So that, it's easy for me to put it in the pond and think about it 10 years later.
So there's, multiple barriers. So the capacity is a really big one. The operational capacity at Loganholme, was that supplied through Downers? Did you have to develop local capability and capacity there?
Yeah, so that was kind of the advantage of it. In Australia, they run things a little bit different. It was very much contractor-led. Downer has integrated services in Australia, so they provide the O&M to the water infrastructure for that council, but they also have the engineering. So when there is a problem, such as biosolid management, rather than sort of having this step-by-step process starting at a consultant and tendering downwards to a contractor, the contractor works with a consultant and acts as a consultant to develop solutions. And I actually think that's a smart way of doing it, when you have the people on the ground who are very in touch with the industry working alongside consultants who have the technical know-how to produce solutions rather than separating them in silos. So that was Downer's input, because they had that operational day-to-day.
Yep. And so Downers are operating this plant on behalf.
Yep.
Yep. So that's an interesting model that that is a way that New Zealand could.
I think it's happening though.
invest.
I think it's you're starting to see these relationships happen in New Zealand. Have you noticed? I've noticed.
Yeah, well, we've got plant operators like Veolia and Alloy, but I don't know how the current thing, how they are trained in biosolids and those kind of processes.
Yeah, resourcing is always going to be something that we need to think about. But I suppose if you have something here, or you start an industry here, it's going to start attracting professionals in the space. So in a way, you're kind of creating a new industry.
Yeah, and that's what we need to do, isn't it? We need to attract people in and give them a career path, let them know how fascinating and interesting wastewater treatment is. And so I guess, what is great about biosolids, Salma? Why should anyone really want to work with biosolids in waste treatment?
Like I said, I find it interesting. I think actually wastewater and biosolid people are weird in the sense that we are actually really into it. I think it doesn't take much to attract people who are already in the industry, because once you get into the industry, you see how magical treatment is and how valuable it is as a resource. And I think people in this space are actually pretty passionate people. You two are, and any operator is actually really keen about what they do. So I don't, convincing someone about how cool biosolid and wastewater is, I don't even think is necessary. Once they start it, they'll find it,
Yeah. How about you, Ash? What's great about it?
I think it's a resource. I mean, we haven't recognized the value of that. And so I think it's the change of maybe perception, maybe look at it as a resource recovery type of material rather than something that you throw away.
Bit of a rebranding for biosolids and waste.
Yeah.
So the nutrient factory or the energy factory, your treatment plant is a resource recovery centre.
We'll leave that with you.
Okay.
Hey, I was curious to ask, so obviously both of you have worked in biosolid management in New Zealand. So could you talk to me about what the drivers for your clients were and what options you provided? I'm really just curious.
Yeah, I think Ash has talked about some of the small ones, and it really is, how do I get rid of biosolids at minimum cost and disruption to my plant?
Yeah.
And in the larger centres, it's been space, landfill costs, increasingly a trend towards, reusable products. I think we should give a shout out to Watercare here for their new fertiliser. That's New Zealand's, I think it's second or third product that's come onto the market from a treatment plant. Back in the day, you could pick them up from the Rosedale treatment plant gate. This is a while ago, people, not recently. And obviously New Plymouth, others do theirs. Hamilton is vermicomposting. So there's lots of different initiatives. But here's this new struvite, fertiliser. It's come to market. It's being promoted in the market. And so this might be the start for New Zealand, the first of, here are the products that we can sell generally to people and make them seem valuable.
Yep.
And I think this is where we're heading. And so I'd like to think we're just going to carry on down this road. And when people are planning their biosolids facilities now, they're thinking about, how many could I get in? What other waste streams could I bring in? What could I make out of this? What is the money I can make? What's the environmental benefit that I can sustain? And I think that is what is going to make wastewater, and particularly biosolids and resource recovery, really attractive. Because anyone who's looking at the circular economy, at how we're going to, become more carbon neutral in the future, is going to look at this as a giant opportunity to get into. And so, prediction, Ash, in the next 20 years, what will we see?
We'll see a lot of improvement, certainly. And as these technologies develop, just neighboring countries, Australia, it's easier to then bring it back here. So I think we'll be in a better space. I think I'm quite optimistic.
Great. So we're quite optimistic. Biosolids and wastewater treatment is generally awesome. And if you're contemplating a career in it, you should, without a doubt. So I'd like to say thanks to Salma and to Ash for this chat about biosolids.
Thanks.
Thanks.